Before we begin the story, let us know where you're watching from by leaving a comment below. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Have a wonderful day. Enjoy the story, everyone. The Manhattan skyline shimmered beyond the glass walls of the Bennett penthouse, glowing gold in the fading light of the day. From the outside, it looked like the perfect life. An expansive apartment high above the city. A marriage between a brilliant billionaire and a poised, beautiful woman. But inside the elegant walls of the top floor, silence spoke louder than any symphony. Sophia Lane stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, her arms wrapped around herself, as if her own touch could offer warmth. 3 years of marriage, and yet her skin still ached with the kind of longing that had no place in her reality. Behind her, the soft clink of a teacup touching its saucer was the only other sound in the room. Nathan Bennett, her husband, sat in his usual spot on the velvet armchair across the room, dressed in his tailored navy suit, one he wore even at home. As if shedding his armor meant letting something dangerous escape, he looked at her, his gaze lingering longer than usual, almost tender. But it was a gaze that stopped short of action, like so many others. "I made jasmine," he said, lifting the second cup from the tray and placing it on the glass coffee table nearest her. She turned slowly, letting her eyes settle on him. The sight still weakened her breath. Dark hair with a single strand out of place, eyes so intensely blue they seemed to hide oceans of things unsaid, and a mouth she had never kissed, not truly, not since the wedding. "Thank you," she whispered, walking toward the cup, her silk dress gliding over the hardwood. "You remembered it's my favorite. I never forget the things that matter." The words hovered between them, like a promise or an apology. Sophia couldn't tell which. She watched him retreat back into silence, back into himself, as if even kindness had its limits. Their marriage had always been like this, a ceremony performed for the world to see, followed by a honeymoon that never truly began. She remembered that night vividly, standing in a candlelit suite, heart pounding, wearing the ivory silk nightgown her mother had given her as a gift, hopeful, nervous, ready to love him. But Nathan had only held her, whispered something about her being too precious, too untouchable. "I need to be worthy of you," he had said, as if she were some celestial being he dared not approach. And then he had fallen asleep beside her, arms around her but body distant. That was 1,095 days ago. They'd never tried again. At first, Sophia had believed it was just nerves, maybe something unresolved from his past. But as the weeks turned to months and the months to years, the truth became harder to deny. He wouldn't touch her, wouldn't kiss her, wouldn't even hold her hand unless it was required in front of others. And yet, in small, inexplicable ways, he showed care. Her favorite books appeared on her nightstand. Fresh gardenias were placed in the hallway every Sunday, though she had never mentioned how much she loved them. Whenever she had a headache, her tea came already brewed with lemon and honey. He noticed everything except her pain. "You work too late," she said now, trying to break the silence that had become their third presence. "I hardly see you anymore." "I know." He looked up, regret flickering in his eyes like a broken street lamp. "Things are complicated at the firm, but I'll be home more, I promise." Promises. She had a drawer full of them, spoken in hushed tones, written on post-its, sent in texts between meetings. But not a single one had ever said, "I love you." Not once. "Sometimes," she said, lifting the cup to her lips, "I wonder if you married me out of obligation." Nathan flinched, just barely, but she saw it. He looked down at his hands, flexing them as if holding something too fragile. "I didn't," he said quietly. "Then why do you treat me like glass?" Her voice cracked, and for a moment, the facade trembled. His eyes lifted to hers again, darker now, stormier. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Whatever words battled in his throat, they died before reaching her. Instead, he stood and walked toward the hallway. Before disappearing, he paused. "You deserve better than this," he said. It wasn't a confession. It wasn't an explanation. It was just another line in the book of silence they shared. Later that night, Sophia lay in the cold center of their bed. She had stopped waiting for him to join her long ago. He rarely did, and when he did, it was always after she had fallen asleep. The sheets never tangled, their bodies never met, but tonight she couldn't sleep. She walked barefoot into the hallway, then the study, expecting it to be empty. Instead, she found Nathan there, shirt unbuttoned, sleeves rolled up, staring at something on the wall, and then she saw it. One of the walls in his private study was covered in sketches, charcoal, pencil, ink, all of her. laughing on the terrace, reading on the couch, sitting by the piano in the morning light. Next to the sketches, hundreds of candid photos, unposed, honest, raw. She gasped. Nathan turned slowly, his expression unreadable. "You're not supposed to be in here," he said. But his voice held no anger, only fear. Her eyes were wide, full of something between awe and confusion. "What is this?" He looked at her like a man who had just been caught bleeding. "It's the only way I've ever been able to touch you," he said. And for the first time in 3 years, she didn't walk away. She stepped closer, but he stepped back. "I can't," he whispered. "Not yet." Outside, the city glittered like 1,000 secrets waiting to be revealed. Inside, Sophia stood on the edge of something she didn't yet understand. She didn't know that hidden behind the coldness of his gaze and the precision of his distance was a war he had been fighting in silence. And soon, that silence would begin to shatter. The memory had softened at the edges now, like a photograph left too long in the sun, yet Sophia could still feel the weight of that night, as if it had happened just yesterday, their wedding night, a moment that should have marked the beginning of everything, but instead carved a silence so deep it would echo for years. The suite in Santorini was something out of a dream. White drapes billowed with the breeze from the open balcony, and the scent of salt water lingered in the air. Dozens of candles flickered across the room, casting golden light over satin sheets, and rose petals scattered like whispers on the bed. The villa was isolated, perched on a cliff with the sea below and stars above. Nothing existed beyond that moment except them. Sophia had spent hours preparing, not for appearance but for emotion. She had showered slowly, letting the warmth soak into her skin, then slipped into the ivory nightgown her mother had chosen for her, a delicate piece of silk and lace passed down through generations. Her heart had pounded with every step toward the bedroom, filled with a quiet mix of nerves and hope. Nathan had been standing by the balcony, a glass of wine in his hand, his back to her. The moonlight caught his profile just enough for her to see the tension in his jaw. "I didn't expect you to wear that," he said softly, without turning. "It was my mother's," she replied. "She said a wedding night is sacred, that it becomes a memory you carry in your body." He set the glass down with care and turned. His eyes met hers, and something in them shifted, not desire, not fear, something else, something tortured. She took slow steps toward him, and he didn't move. Her hands found his chest, fingers curling against the crisp white of his shirt. She waited for his touch, his kiss, his surrender. But Nathan didn't reach for her. Instead, he gently placed his hands on her arms and stepped back, as if her closeness burned him. "Sophia," his voice cracked, "you don't know how long I've waited to see you like this. You're breathtaking." "Then come closer," she whispered. "Please." But he shook his head, almost imperceptibly. "You're too precious. I can't. Not like this. Not yet." Her brows furrowed. Because of nerves? Because of expectations? He didn't answer. "Nathan," she said again, quieter now, "we're married." "I know. Then what are we waiting for?" He looked away, toward the sea. "For me to deserve you." She wanted to scream or cry or vanish into the breeze that danced through the curtains, but she didn't. Instead, she reached for his hand and held it. His fingers trembled against hers. "Whatever it is," she whispered, "we'll face it together." And for a moment, it felt like he believed her. That night, he didn't make love to her. He didn't even kiss her lips. He undressed only enough to hold her in his arms, and she rested her head on his chest, listening to the ache in his heartbeat. He whispered things in the dark, half-confessions, half-prayers, that she was the only light he'd ever known, that her laughter was the only sound that made him forget the noise in his head, that loving her terrified him more than death. She fell asleep that night in his arms, thinking, tomorrow he'll be ready. But tomorrow never came. The days that followed were filled with polite smiles and polite space. Nathan became even more meticulous, arranging romantic dinners she didn't ask for, planning trips she never took, sending her flowers every Monday without fail. But he never touched her again. She waited the first week, then the second. A month passed, then 2, until the waiting became routine, and her longing turned into quiet grief. She didn't tell anyone, not even her best friend. The world saw their photos and called them the perfect couple. Magazine covers praised their elegance, their privacy, their love story. But only Sophia knew the truth, that she shared her life with a man who adored her from a distance he refused to cross. And so the mourning began, not for a man lost, but for a closeness denied. She mourned every time she walked out of the shower and found the bathroom mirror fogged with poems he wrote and wiped away before she could read them. She mourned each night she woke to find him watching her sleep, only for him to pretend he was reading when she opened her eyes. And she mourned most of all for the wedding night that never was, the night that lived like a ghost in their bed. Sometimes, Sophia would run her fingers over the silk nightgown, still folded neatly in the top drawer. She never wore it again. It felt like wearing a memory that hadn't been allowed to become real. One evening, nearly a year after their wedding, she found a note tucked inside a book on her nightstand, in Nathan's unmistakable handwriting. It simply said, "If I ever touch you the way I dream of, I won't survive it." She stared at the words for a long time, then tore the paper and threw it into the fire, because dreams didn't keep you warm at night. And yet, she never stopped wanting him, never stopped believing that beneath the silence and the rules and the fear, he loved her. She saw it in the way he'd brush a strand of hair behind her ear when she wasn't looking, in the way he watched her play piano, as if each note was stitched to his ribs, in the way he flinched every time she cried, though he never spoke. One night, 2 years into their marriage, she'd asked him quietly, "What are we?" Nathan had looked at her for a long, unbearable moment, then said, "I'm your protector." "But I didn't marry a bodyguard." "No," he whispered. "You married a coward who wishes he were brave enough to love you the way you deserve." And that was when Sophia realized something deeper than any wound. This wasn't a marriage. It was a prison built from fear and dressed in gold. But she didn't know yet what he was protecting her from. And that truth, the one hidden behind years of distance, was about to come crashing into their lives. Nathan Bennett was a man chained by elegance. Every move he made, every word he spoke, was laced with restraint, like a symphony composed entirely in silence. But behind his calculated stillness, behind every unfinished touch and every broken promise, there lived a secret. One that had been forged in ink and blood 3 years earlier, just weeks before the wedding. Nathan had sat across from Victor Shaw in a private suite at the Astor, an exclusive club only billionaires whispered about. Victor wore a smile that never touched his eyes. He spoke slowly, every syllable laced with poison, disguised as politeness. "You're marrying her," Victor said, swirling a glass of scotch. "But you're also marrying into something you don't understand." "I'm not marrying her for you," Nathan replied, his jaw tight. "No," Victor agreed, "you're marrying her despite me. And that, my dear Nathan, is a mistake you'll bleed for." On the table between them was a contract, 17 pages long, legally binding and soaked in implications no ordinary court would dare question. Nathan had read every clause. The condition was clear. 5 years of absolute celibacy, not only with Sophia, with any woman. If Nathan breached the contract, everything would be forfeited. His shares, his investments, his estates, his name, and Sophia. In black and white, it stated, "Upon breach, full legal control of shared marital assets and spousal guardianship shall be transferred to Victor Shaw." Guardianship, as if Sophia were a piece of property, a clause built on centuries-old legal loopholes buried deep within the trust funds that protected old money dynasties. Nathan had wanted to burn it, tear it apart. But Victor had leaned in then, eyes gleaming like a vulture's, and dropped the final nail. "You saw what happened to Eleanor. You remember her, don't you? Eleanor Brooks, Nathan's ex-fiancée, gentle, artistic, pregnant. She had died in a car accident 2 months after Nathan ended things, but no part of him believed it was accidental. "You're threatening her," Nathan growled. "I'm protecting my legacy," Victor replied. "Just like you'll protect yours if you sign." Nathan had signed. He had signed because Victor owned the shadows Nathan once escaped from. Because somewhere in that maze of bloodlines, secrets, and power plays, Victor Shaw held a darkness Nathan couldn't yet destroy. And Sophia, radiant Sophia, had no idea she was walking into a marriage that had been cursed before it began. Now, years later, Nathan sat alone in his study, staring at that same contract. The edges were worn, smudged with fingerprints and rage. The ink was fading, but its power remained sharp as ever. He had built walls of silence between himself and the woman he loved, not out of pride, but out of desperation. Every step he took closer to Sophia was a step toward losing her forever. What kind of man trades his own touch for the safety of the woman he loves? The kind who's seen what Victor does to women who disobey. The kind who holds his desire like a loaded weapon. And Sophia, she had no idea, but she was beginning to question everything. That morning, she had noticed the padlock on the lower drawer of Nathan's desk, the one he always kept closed, even when everything else was open to her. And for the first time, she tried the keys. They didn't fit. She had knocked on the door as Nathan shaved in the bathroom. "There's a drawer in your office I've never seen open," she said casually. "What's inside?" "A contract," he said, too quickly. "For what?" "Business." She nodded, pretending to believe him, but her heart told a different story, one that pulsed louder with each passing day, because nothing in their marriage made sense. Why marry her at all if he didn't want her body? Why hold her at night like a treasure, then never claim her as his? Why cry out her name in sleep, only to go cold by morning? Why this ache between them, so full of devotion and denial? Later that week, Sophia returned from an art exhibit and found Nathan asleep on the couch, one hand resting on a book of poems she hadn't seen before. It was open to a marked page, and written in the margin, in his handwriting, hurried and raw, were the words, "Touch her and you lose her. Keep her and lose yourself." She stared at the ink for what felt like hours. When he woke up, she didn't mention it. But something inside her began to unravel. The questions she had buried were now clawing their way to the surface, and Nathan could feel it. One evening, while they were dining under the stars on the penthouse terrace, she finally asked, "Did you marry me to protect me?" His fork froze in midair, his throat tightened, but he didn't look away. "Yes," her voice trembled. "From what?" And this time, he didn't answer. Because how do you tell the woman you love that a man wants to own her like a trophy, that your touch could trigger a storm of destruction planned years in advance, that her very safety depends on your own misery? The curse wasn't in their stars, it was in their signatures. And Nathan knew the closer they got, the louder the trap would click shut. But what he didn't know, what neither of them saw coming, was that someone else was watching. Someone who wanted to ensure the contract would be broken, not out of justice, but out of obsession. And when that someone decided to move, their fragile illusion of safety would shatter in a single night. Sophia had always sensed it, the way Nathan looked at her when he thought she wasn't watching. It wasn't lust, it wasn't possession, it was something far more dangerous. Reverence, like he worshipped her in silence because saying the words out loud would set the world on fire. She felt it in the way he adjusted her scarf before she left for meetings, in the way he paused just a second too long before stepping out of a room she entered, in the way he filled their home with quiet acts of care, always watching, always near, yet never crossing that invisible line between presence and touch. But it wasn't until she stumbled into his secret that she truly understood. It happened on a Wednesday. She was searching for a missing sketchbook, one she used to journal her dreams, when a misplaced drawer in the hallway closet jammed. Sophia knelt to fix it and noticed a small brass key, dusty and tucked beneath some old winter gloves. It didn't match any locks she knew of. Curiosity bloomed where trust had begun to wither. That evening, after Nathan left for a dinner meeting, she tried the key on the one place he always kept locked, a second study hidden behind the main library wall. She had only seen it once, when the contractor mentioned it during the remodel. Nathan had brushed it off, just extra storage, nothing interesting. But when the key turned, the door creaked open like a confession long buried. What she found inside made her breath catch. The room was dim, lit only by a floor lamp near the corner. The walls were covered, not with books or blueprints, but with her. Drawings, photographs, paintings, dozens, maybe hundreds. Some were sketches in graphite, rough and emotional. Others were watercolors, ethereal and soft. One massive canvas leaned against the wall, unfinished, her likeness suspended in a half-formed sunrise. And then the photos, thousands of them, most taken in secret. Sophia reading on the balcony, laughing while talking on the phone, brushing her hair in the mirror, asleep in bed. She stepped closer, trembling, scanning the titles written beneath each piece. The 12th of August, her smile after tea, first time she wore blue, when she thought I wasn't looking. She pressed her hand to her mouth. This wasn't just art. This was obsession, intimate, raw, holy. Her gaze fell on a sketch tacked at eye level, one of her crying on the rooftop garden, a place she sometimes escaped to late at night when the silence in the apartment became too loud. She had never told Nathan about those nights. She had never even known he'd seen her. And yet, here she was, immortalized in pain, in beauty, in solitude. It should have scared her. It should have felt invasive, but it didn't, because every piece in that room screamed what Nathan had never said. "I see you." The sound of the front door closing startled her. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. She froze, heart pounding, unsure of whether to hide or confront. Nathan appeared in the doorway seconds later. His expression didn't hold anger. It held devastation. "You weren't supposed to find this," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. She turned slowly. "Why?" He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "Because it's the only place I allow myself to have you." Her breath caught. "You have me, Nathan. I'm your wife. Number." He looked away. "You're my vow, my penance, my salvation. But I don't get to have you. Not the way I want." She took a step forward, her voice trembling. "Then what is all this?" He exhaled shakily. "My war with myself, with the rules I accepted, with the distance I force between us every day." "I thought you didn't want me," she whispered. His eyes snapped to hers, pained and furious at the lie. "Not want you?" He crossed the room in 3 strides, stopping just short of touching her, his hands clenched at his sides. "Sophia, I wake up craving the shape of your breath. I can't walk past you without memorizing the sound of your steps. I spend every night imagining what it would feel like to fall asleep inside your soul." Her throat tightened, tears rising. "Then why won't you?" "Because the moment I do," he interrupted, "I lose you." She shook her head, confused. "You lose me? How?" "I've made choices, signed things I can't undo. There are rules keeping me away from you. If I cross the line, Sophia, it's not just me who pays." "But I'm already paying," she said, her voice breaking, with silence, with emptiness, with a love I don't understand. He looked at her then, and everything he'd held back for years cracked open in his gaze. "I love you," he said. "God help me, I love you so much it kills me not to prove it." The air shifted. The distance between them became unbearable. Sophia took a step closer, then stopped, hiding behind paper and walls. "Tell me everything." Nathan hesitated. Then he whispered, "Not here." She followed him as he locked the door behind them. They walked in silence, hands still not touching. Yet the space between them was charged. That night, he didn't return to his usual study. He stood by their bedroom door, as if contemplating whether to enter, and then he said quietly, "There's something I need to show you, but not in this city, not with ears on every wall." "Where?" she asked. His answer came like a promise and a warning. "Somewhere no one can follow us." What Sophia didn't know, what Nathan was trying to delay, was that someone already had. That night, as they slept in separate rooms again, a red light blinked faintly behind the vent in the corner of Nathan's secret gallery. Someone had seen everything, and soon, the silence wouldn't be enough to protect them. The date crept up on Sophia like a whisper, soft but unforgettable. 3 years. 3 years of marriage without consummation. 3 years of nights spent curled on opposite sides of a shared bed. Of birthdays marked with diamonds, but not with kisses. Of Nathan's unwavering protection and his unwavering distance. And yet, she still loved him. It wasn't rational, it wasn't deserved, but it was real. This year, she didn't want a bouquet of imported lilies. She didn't want a dinner reservation with 10 courses and no conversation. She didn't want to be worshipped from afar like a goddess in a glass cage. She wanted to be his, for one night, completely, without secrets, without restraint. So she made a choice. The morning of their anniversary, Sophia woke before sunrise. She stood at the edge of their bed and looked at Nathan's sleeping form. He seemed peaceful there, more boy than billionaire, the kind of man who used to build tree houses or write poems on napkins. She brushed her fingers softly over his cheek, and for a moment his lips parted, as if searching for her, even in sleep. But then the guard returned, even unconscious. Still, she smiled, because tonight would be different. She spent the day preparing, not for a party or a show, but for him, for them. Every detail mattered. The flickering candles that lined the hallway, the soft music that pulsed like a heartbeat in the background, the scent of vanilla and rose oil in the air. Her dress, if it could be called that, was more whisper than fabric, a slip of lace and silk that clung to her curves like a secret finally spoken. And on the bed, one simple note, written in her own hand. No more distance, no more fear. Tonight, I'm not asking. I'm waiting. Nathan arrived just after 9. She heard the soft thud of his briefcase against the console, followed by the pause. He always paused, as if listening for the mood of the apartment before entering fully. But this time, something in the air had changed. It wasn't just romantic, it was charged, bold, alive. "Sophia," he called out softly, voice cautious. She didn't answer. Instead, she waited in the bedroom, heart pounding as the door creaked open. His silhouette appeared in the doorway, frozen in place. She stood before him, framed by candlelight, her body trembling, not with fear, but with hope. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The silence between them stretched, vibrating with years of longing. Then Nathan stepped forward, slowly, like a man walking through a dream. "You look," he didn't finish the sentence. She walked to him, placed her hand on his chest. "No more rituals, Nathan. No more protection. Just this. You, me, us." His jaw clenched. "You don't understand." "I understand more than you think," she interrupted. "I've seen your sketches. I've read the lines you thought I'd never see. I've watched you suffer silently, believing that pushing me away keeps me safe. But Nathan, what if loving me is the only thing that can save you?" He looked at her then, truly looked, as if everything he'd buried behind years of silence was crashing into the surface. "I've wanted you," he said hoarsely, "every day, every hour. Do you understand what it's cost me not to touch you?" "Then don't pay any more," she whispered. "Take what's already yours." And with that, her lips brushed his. It wasn't a kiss. Not yet. Just a breath shared, a barrier broken. She felt him shudder beneath her touch, his hands hovering at her waist, like he was afraid she might disappear. And just as he finally leaned in, a soft beep echoed from the corner of the room. Nathan froze. "Don't move," he whispered. He crossed the room in 4 strides, opened a panel hidden behind the painting. A small screen blinked red. Surveillance alert. Encrypted. Someone had hacked into their home system. A second later, a message flashed across the monitor. "She's not safe. I warned you." Nathan's face drained of color. Sophia stood in the doorway, half dressed in lace, heart sinking fast. "What is that?" He didn't answer. Instead, he pulled her into his arms, but not with desire this time, with urgency. He grabbed a bag from under the bed, one she didn't even know existed, already packed. "Nathan, what's happening?" "We're being watched." Her blood went cold. "By who?" "By someone who knows the terms. Someone who wants the contract broken." He scanned the corners of the room, then the ceiling, then the hallway. "We have to go. Now." She didn't argue. There was something in his tone she'd never heard before, not just fear, but fury. They left through the service elevator, Sophia still barefoot, wrapped in a trench coat Nathan had thrown over her shoulders. The streets of Manhattan were buzzing as always. But to Sophia, everything felt unreal, like the world had tilted sideways. They entered a black car already waiting by the back alley. The driver didn't speak. Nathan gave no directions. For over an hour, they drove in silence, city lights blurring behind tinted glass. Sophia held his hand the entire time, and for once, he didn't pull away. "I don't understand," she finally whispered. "Why now?" "Because someone wants you taken from me," he said darkly, "and they were waiting for me to get close enough to give them the reason." And in that moment, she realized the truth. This wasn't just about a marriage. It was about war. A war Nathan had fought alone for years. And tonight, on their anniversary, they had finally crossed the line between safety and exposure. They didn't sleep that night. The safe house was hidden inside a former artist's loft in Brooklyn, buried behind layers of false leases and shell companies, one of Nathan's many secret investments. The building looked abandoned from the outside. Inside, it was a fortress. Sophia sat on the worn leather sofa, a blanket over her shoulders, her hair still damp from the rain. She didn't ask how he knew where to go or why the security panels responded to his fingerprints like muscle memory. She just watched. Nathan moved with precision. He checked the blinds, swept the rooms, disabled all Wi-Fi signals, and activated a private satellite line. His body spoke a language of habit and high alert, like he had done this before. Like he wasn't just a billionaire, but something far more dangerous. At 3 a.m., he finally sat down beside her, but the silence between them was heavier than ever. "Nathan," she began softly, "what aren't you telling me?" He looked at her, and for the first time, his armor cracked fully. "They know," he said. "Whoever's watching, they've been inside the apartment, probably more than once. Cameras. Audio. They were waiting for the moment I'd break the contract." Her eyes widened. "But you didn't." "I touched your lips." He ran a hand through his hair. "That's enough for them." She stared at him, stunned. "That's all it takes? A kiss?" "It's not about the kiss," he said. "It's about control. The contract is just a leash. What they want is to punish me for loving you." She couldn't breathe. Who's behind this? Victor. Nathan nodded. And he's not alone. Before she could press further, the building's emergency lights flickered. A beat later, they heard the unmistakable sound of a window shattering. Sophia's heart slammed into her ribs. Nathan was already on his feet. Go to the panic room, he ordered. Back hallway. Code is 4786. What about you? I'll meet you there. Nathan, go. She ran. Behind her, she heard footsteps, voices, a crash, then silence. Inside the panic room, small, dark, lined with soundproof steel, Sophia tried to slow her breathing. Her fingers trembled as she entered the code. The door sealed behind her with a hiss. She waited. Minutes stretched. No sound. Then the door opened again. Nathan appeared, shirt torn, lip bleeding, eyes burning. He slammed the door shut behind him and activated lockdown. We have to disappear, he said breathlessly. Tonight. Disappear? She echoed. He nodded. No more penthouse, no more Bennett Enterprises, no more traceable lives. If we stay above ground, they'll take you. I don't care about the money, she said. I do, he replied, because he does. And if we strip me of value, Victor has no use for you. What does that mean? He looked at her and said the words like a knife. He doesn't want you. He wants to own you, like he did Eleanor. The name hit her like cold water. I thought she was your ex-fiancée, Sophia whispered. She was, and she died in a car crash. She was pushed, Nathan said, voice hollow, not by Victor's hand, but by his will. Sophia felt like the floor was vanishing beneath her feet. You think he'll kill me too? I know he will, if it gives him control. They stared at each other, breathless, like two souls standing at the edge of the same cliff. I should have told you, Nathan said finally, about the contract. About him. But I thought, if I could just hold out, if I could protect you long enough, we could have forever. Tears filled her eyes, and now he stepped closer, cupped her face with trembling hands. Now I'm done protecting you with silence. We fight. She nodded slowly, as if something ancient inside her had awakened. Then let's make him regret ever touching our lives. He smiled for the first time in days small, broken, real. I hoped you'd say that. The next 72 hours passed in motion. They moved between safe locations, burner phones, aliases. Nathan contacted people Sophia had never heard of, tech experts, ex-intelligence agents, legal mercenaries. Each conversation brought them closer to the core of Victor's empire and to the truth behind the contract's creation. Along the way, something shifted between them. Maybe it was the adrenaline, maybe it was the truth finally flooding the cracks between them, but for the first time in 3 years, Sophia and Nathan began to live in the same moment. No more unspoken barriers, no more calculated space. One night, after a narrow escape in Boston, they slept in the same bed, fully clothed but entwined. Her head on his chest, his fingers tangled in her hair. No secrets, no fear, just breath, just being. And for the first time, Sophia whispered what she had always known. I've never stopped loving you. Nathan pulled her closer. And I've never started loving anyone but you. But the world outside wasn't finished testing them. Because just as they found safety in each other, another message came through. This one handwritten, hand-delivered, and left on the windshield of their stolen car. 5 words. You're running out of time. The Caribbean sun shimmered over the horizon, casting golden reflections on the still waters of the Virgin Islands. But Sophia barely noticed the view. Her gaze was fixed on Nathan, who stood barefoot on the deck of the private yacht, arms folded, eyes distant. They hadn't spoken much since arriving. This was supposed to be their moment of peace, off-grid, untraceable, finally alone, but instead of bringing clarity, the beauty around them only seemed to magnify the weight pressing between them. I didn't bring you here to escape, Nathan said finally, his voice low and rough. I brought you here to tell you everything. Sophia's heart tightened. She followed him below deck, where the yacht's interior was warm with mahogany and muted light. Nathan reached into a safe embedded in the wall and pulled out a black leather folder. He handed it to her, like someone surrendering a weapon. This is the contract, he said, the one I signed before we were married. She opened it slowly. Legal language, dense paragraphs, cold, brutal terms. She skimmed until one clause caught her eye, highlighted, annotated, and marked with a date 2 days before their wedding. In the event of physical intimacy with any woman during the contract period, all Bennett-owned assets, holdings, and guardianship privileges, including marital rights, shall be transferred in full to Victor Shaw or his appointed representative. Her blood ran cold. Guardianship, she whispered. Like I'm property. He sat down, suddenly looking 10 years older. That clause was inserted when Victor learned I was marrying you. It was meant to be a leash. If I break the contract, I lose everything. And by everything, I mean you. She stared at him in disbelief. How could you agree to this? Because the alternative was worse, he said. He threatened you not directly, never openly, but I've seen what he does to women who get in his way. Eleanor was the first. Sophia swallowed hard. What happened to her? Nathan leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. Eleanor and I were engaged before I met you. We ended things because I discovered she was pregnant, and it wasn't mine. Sophia's eyes widened. She was scared. Victor had power over her family. She tried to run. 2 months later, her car lost control on a rain-slicked road. The police called it an accident. I call it a message. And the baby? Sophia asked, barely breathing. Gone, he said. But I'll never forget what she told me the night she vanished. If something happens to me, don't let him do the same to the next one. Sophia closed the folder, her hands shaking. And you think I'm the next one? I know you are. She stood, pacing the room, emotions spiraling. So all this time, every night you pulled away from me, every time you said I was too precious, it wasn't because you didn't want me. It was because you thought touching me would hand me over to a monster. Yes, and you never told me. Her voice broke. You let me believe I wasn't enough. I let you believe that because I thought the truth would destroy you. She turned on him, eyes blazing. No, what's destroyed me is living in a marriage that felt like a grave. Nathan stood slowly, not in anger, but in sorrow. I thought I could outlast the contract, just 5 years. 5 years of distance, 5 years of pretending I wasn't in love with you. She blinked back tears. You're still pretending. Silence fell between them, thick and unbearable. Then Nathan said something that shattered everything. I watched you every night and begged God to let me forget your face. Sophia gasped softly, one hand covering her heart. But I couldn't, he continued. So I painted it instead, drew it, built rooms around it, because if I couldn't hold you, I'd at least remember you in pieces. Her voice trembled. And now? He stepped closer. Now I'm done being a ghost in my own marriage. She shook her head. But if you touch me, then I lose everything. They were inches apart now. And if you don't, she whispered, then I lose you. A storm of emotion cracked between them, unspeakable and raw. But before either of them could decide what that meant, Sophia's phone vibrated on the table. Unknown number, no message, just an image. She opened it and froze. It was a photo of her on the yacht, taken from a distance, time-stamped 10 minutes ago. We're not alone, she said, her voice hollow. Nathan snatched the phone, his jaw tightening. They found us. She backed away, panic rising. What do we do? He met her eyes, the weight of the last 3 years boiling to the surface. We stop running. But how? He took her face in his hands, kissed her forehead like a vow, and whispered, we give him something he's not ready for. Sophia's heart pounded. What? We fight back publicly, legally, with proof. She frowned. What proof? He pulled a hidden flash drive from the safe. Everything. Contracts, surveillance files, phone logs, hidden accounts, even a witness. Her breath hitched. Who? Clara Brooks, he said. Eleanor's sister. Sophia asked, why would she help us? Because she hates Victor more than I do. He didn't say the rest. That Clara had spent years trying to avenge her sister but lacked the power. Now Nathan had it, and he planned to use every piece. But Sophia's mind reeled with something else. That image on her phone, the invasion, the contract, the kiss that almost happened. Everything was building to something. She looked at Nathan, her voice shaking. If we go to war, there's no turning back. He met her gaze, still in his eyes. Then we burn the bridge behind us. The cemetery was quiet, nestled on the outskirts of Boston, where the trees whispered secrets to the wind. Sophia had never been there before, yet something about the place felt familiar, like her presence had been expected all along. She stood in front of the marble headstone, arms crossed tightly, a chill running down her spine. The name etched in stone sent a pulse through her chest. Eleanor Brooks, 1989 to 2018. She was light in the dark, and someone feared her shine. Beneath the inscription, someone had left a single white rose, fresh, placed within the last hour. Sophia's fingers trembled as she knelt beside the grave, brushing fallen leaves away. Her thoughts tangled with images she had never known, with grief she hadn't earned but somehow carried anyway. She felt a presence behind her before she heard the voice. She never belonged in that world. Sophia turned. Clara Brooks. She looked nothing like the rumors, no cold air, no broken woman fueled by vengeance. Clara stood tall, wind tousling her dark hair, her eyes fierce and tired. "I didn't know you'd be here," Sophia said quietly. "I asked Nathan to send you," Clara replied. "I needed to look you in the eyes." There was no softness in her tone, no warmth, just history and fire. "You think I'm her replacement?" Sophia said. Clara's eyes didn't flinch. "Aren't you?" Sophia looked back at the grave. "I don't know anymore." They stood in silence for a moment, the kind that weighed heavier than words. "She was everything to me," Clara began. "My sister, my anchor, until she fell into Victor's world. She met him at a fundraiser, charming, powerful. He took interest in her, like she was prey. She was with Nathan," Sophia said, "only after Victor. She thought she could run from one devil by falling into the arms of a better man." Clara's voice cracked. But she didn't know Nathan was already entangled, that he was playing by rules no one could see. Sophia turned to face her. "He loved her." "Yes," Clara said, "but he didn't save her." That landed like a blow. "I'm not blaming him," she added. "He tried. God, he tried. But Victor had already claimed her legally, financially, emotionally, and when she found out she was pregnant, she begged me to help her disappear." "Was the child Victor's?" Sophia asked. Clara's eyes burned. "Not Nathan's. That's the part the world never knew. That's the part Victor erased." Sophia's knees weakened, and she sat on the stone bench nearby. "She came to me the night before she died," Clara continued. "She was shaking," said Victor knew, that he'd kill her rather than let the secret come out. She was right. Sophia swallowed hard. "The car accident? Sabotaged," Clara said. "The brakes failed, but by the time the police got to it, the evidence had vanished." "Why didn't you tell anyone?" Clara looked up at the sky, bitterness thick in her breath. "Because I tried, and every time I spoke up, I was silenced. My accounts frozen, my name blacklisted. Victor has hands in law, politics, media. I couldn't prove anything, and eventually, I stopped trying. And Nathan, he broke," she said simply. "He disappeared for a year, came back with cold eyes and more money than I thought possible. That's when I knew he'd made a deal." Sophia closed her eyes. "The contract," she murmured. Clara nodded. "It wasn't just to protect himself. It was to ensure what happened to Eleanor wouldn't happen again." Sophia felt like she was sinking into a past she didn't live, but had been living under all along. "You hate me," she said quietly. Clara didn't deny it. "I don't know you," she said. "But every time I look at you, I see what she never got a second chance. I didn't ask for this." "No," Clara agreed, "but you survived it." There was something in her voice, something like reluctant respect. "Why did you finally agree to help Nathan?" Sophia asked. "Because he's not asking to run anymore. He's asking to burn the system that built men like Victor. And he can't do it without you." Sophia stood again, her hands clenched at her sides. "I'm not Eleanor," she said. Clara tilted her head. "Then don't be like she did." They stared at each other, and something passed between them, an understanding sealed not by forgiveness, but by shared grief. Clara turned to leave, but before she walked away, she said one last thing. "Be careful. Victor's not afraid of killing, but he's terrified of losing control. And right now, you're the one thing he can't own." Back at the safe house, Sophia walked in to find Nathan on the phone, pacing. He looked up, eyes scanning her face. "What did she tell you?" "Everything," Sophia said. He hung up without a word and came to her. "I'm sorry." She shook her head. "No more apologies." "Then what do you want?" he asked, voice cracking. She stepped close. "A plan." He blinked. "A plan? We finish what Eleanor started. We bring him down, and we make sure no one ever signs a contract like that again." He stared at her, equal parts awe and fear. "I don't want to lose you," he whispered. "You already did," she replied. "Now you have to earn me back." Nathan's mouth parted, breath caught in his throat, and Sophia, for the first time, stepped past the fear and kissed his cheek. "I'm not your ghost, Nathan. I'm your storm." But storms don't go unnoticed. And as they embraced, finally aligned, finally ready, across town, Victor Shaw was watching the same cemetery from his car, from behind tinted glass. And in his hand, he held a photograph of Sophia Lane and a lighter. It happened in seconds. One moment, Sophia was stepping out of the hotel in Geneva after a meeting with a potential whistleblower. The next, the world around her turned black. The last thing she remembered was the sting of something sharp in her neck and the sound of tires screeching against cobblestone. then darkness. When she woke, the air was sterile and cold, a clinical white ceiling above her. Her wrists were restrained to a hospital bed, tubes in her arms, electrodes on her temples, and a woman with a clipboard stood at her side, smiling like a nurse from a horror film. "Good morning, Mrs. Bennett," she said in a voice that sent chills across Sophia's skin. "I'm Dr. Lily Hart. I'll be facilitating your transition." "Where am I?" Sophia whispered, throat dry and raw. "You're safe," Lily replied smoothly, "and soon you'll be obedient." Sophia tried to sit up. The restraints cut into her skin. "You can scream if you like," the woman added, scribbling something down. "No one will hear, and honestly, it won't change the outcome." Fear wrapped itself around Sophia's chest like a vice. "Nathan will find me." "Oh, he's quite aware," Lily said, her smile never faltering. "He's watching." The lights dimmed. A monitor on the wall flickered to life. And there he was, Nathan, locked in a separate stark white room, his face pale, his fists bloodied from slamming against the glass, his voice muted but his mouth clearly screaming her name. Sophia's heart shattered. "What do you want?" she demanded. Dr. Hart looked amused. "I want compliance, peace, control. You see, your husband made a promise, a contract. He violated that promise, and now consequences must follow." "I'm not a consequence," Sophia growled. "But you are," she replied. "Your leverage." Over the next hours, days, she couldn't tell Sophia endured sessions meant to recondition her. Drugs designed to suppress memory. Flashes of blinding light. Looped recordings of Victor's voice telling her Nathan had abandoned her. "You are property now," the message repeated. "You were purchased. You were failed." She fought it. Even when the drugs burned her veins, even when the nurse forced her to say Nathan's name and then shocked her for it, even when they paralyzed her body and made her watch recordings of her wedding played in reverse, like undoing the vows, even when they fed her lies. She fought, because in the deepest part of her, Sophia knew the truth. Nathan hadn't given her away. He had died a little every day not touching her, and he would burn the world to get her back. In the next room, Nathan Bennett sat chained to a chair, bruises blooming down his back. He hadn't eaten, hadn't slept, but his eyes were alive, focused. Rage and guilt battled in him like fire and ash. Each time he saw her on the monitor trembling, drugged, forced to whisper that she was no one, he wanted to destroy everything. "You broke the contract," Victor said, appearing in the doorway, dressed like a man on vacation. "You kissed her. You touched her hand. You held her while she slept." Nathan didn't respond. "So now I own her," Victor continued, legally, logistically, entirely. Nathan laughed. "It was broken. You'll never own her spirit." Victor knelt beside him, placing a hand on Nathan's shoulder like a father might. "You still don't get it, do you? This isn't about Sophia. It's about you, about watching the strongest man I know fall to his knees because he couldn't bear to disobey me. You were my favorite." Nathan turned his head slowly, meeting his gaze. "You were always afraid of her. That's why you're doing this. You saw what she could become." Victor's smile faded, just for a second. Then he stood. "Enjoy the show." On the third day, they drugged Sophia again, but something was different this time. As they prepared the IV, the nurse hesitated. Her hand trembled, and then she slipped a small folded piece of paper into Sophia's palm. 6 words. "At midnight, 3rd door. Run. Hope. Sharp. Immediate." Sophia slipped the note under her band. She played weak, played numb. She waited, and when midnight came, she was ready. The escape was chaos. Adrenaline overrode the drugs in her system. She bit the nurse, smashed a tray against a security guard, ran barefoot down metal corridors, alarms screaming. The 3rd door led to a boiler room, empty except for one man, Nathan. He was bleeding from a cut above his eye, one hand still cuffed, but when he saw her, he froze. She wasn't the woman he'd married. She was fire. She grabbed the emergency key from the wall and unlocked his cuff. "Did you think I'd wait for you?" she hissed, and together, they ran through service halls, past stunned guards, down to the lower levels of the facility that looked more like a bunker than a hospital. They stole a car. They didn't speak, not until they were miles away. Then, parked under an overpass, Sophia turned to him, shaking. "I thought you'd given up." "I was planning your rescue," he whispered. "I wasn't going to fail again." She leaned her head against his shoulder. He kissed her hair, and they both cried not just from pain, but from everything that had survived. Back in New York, the world kept turning. But something had shifted. Victor had gone too far, and now Nathan had the one thing Victor never expected: a woman who had seen the worst of his empire and walked out of it alive, with proof, with rage, with purpose. And very, very soon she'd have a voice. Sophia stood barefoot on the balcony of a hideout tucked into the Colorado mountains, the cold biting at her skin like truth finally waking up. Behind her, inside the warm cabin, Nathan watched her through the glass. It had been 3 days since they escaped. 3 days since they'd slept with one eye open, trusting no one but each other. 3 days since Sophia began turning her pain into a plan. Because if Victor thought breaking her would end the war, he had miscalculated everything. She stepped back inside and faced Nathan. He was leaning over a table scattered with maps, legal files, burner phones, and encrypted drives. A laptop blinked softly beside a tangle of wires. On the screen, the beginning of a case that could bring an empire down. "He doesn't hide anymore," Sophia said, crossing her arms. "That makes him sloppy." Nathan glanced up. "We'll need more than rage," she nodded. "Good thing I've got more than that." They began putting the puzzle together. Every thread Victor had tried to hide, every legal shell company, every offshore account linked to Eleanor's name, every falsified death certificate, every altered police report. And then they called in help. Nathan reached out to people no one else could touch: an ex-NSA analyst living off-grid in Maine, a former Wall Street whistleblower now coding in Berlin under a fake name, a journalist who had been blacklisted for exposing corruption within old money families. Each of them owed Nathan. And now they owed Sophia too. One by one, allies assembled in the shadows: digital warriors, legal assassins, ethical hackers. A quiet army that didn't carry weapons but carried proof. But what turned their plan from dangerous to deadly was the woman who showed up unannounced one morning, Clara Brooks. She stepped into the cabin, wearing a trench coat and sunglasses, her presence sharper than any blade. "You'll need me," she said, "and not just for testimony." Sophia approached her cautiously. "Then why are you here?" Clara removed her sunglasses. "Because I found something." She dropped a folder on the table. Inside, dozens of original, unedited security logs from the hospital Eleanor had been taken to before her death. One of them showed that Victor's private car had been registered on site the night she died. And another, more damning, revealed that Victor had personally funded the hospital's renovations the month before Eleanor's admission. "I never stopped digging," Clara said. "I just stopped hoping someone would care." Nathan looked at the documents, eyes narrowing. "This ties him directly." "And we're not done," Clara added. "I want to help you ruin him." They got to work. Over the next 5 days, they built a digital arsenal, leaked financials, audio recordings of Victor coercing investors, video footage from Sophia's torture, sanitized and anonymized but unmistakably damning, and most powerful of all, a testimony signed by Clara, naming Victor as the father of Eleanor's unborn child. They knew the risks. If the information was leaked all at once, Victor would deny it, spin it, bury it. So they made a decision. They would destroy him in public, not just in the media, not just in court, but in front of the same people who once toasted him with champagne. Sophia proposed the location: the Children's Hospital Gala in New York, an event Victor chaired every year, a fundraiser streamed live, broadcast in real time to social media and national networks, a place he'd feel untouchable. "Poetic," Nathan said. "Necessary," Sophia replied. They prepared a presentation, disguised as a donation reveal, embedded within it a bomb of truth. Sophia would take the stage under the pretense of honoring Eleanor's legacy, and from there, they would light the fuse. "Do you think he'll come?" Clara asked. Nathan answered, "Victor's ego wouldn't let him stay away." Sophia looked around the room. Everyone had risked something, but no one had risked more than her. And yet, she didn't feel afraid anymore. "I want to be the one to press play," she said. Nathan stepped beside her, took her hand. "You've already pressed something bigger," he said softly. "You made me believe again." That night, before they left for New York, Sophia sat alone by the fire, holding the flash drive like a prayer. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but she knew this: she had been drugged, broken, manipulated, and silenced. Now she would be heard, and Victor Shaw would never see it coming. The courtroom was packed, every seat occupied, every corner buzzing with reporters, camera crews, and silent whispers that carried centuries of secrets. The trial of Victor Shaw had become a media frenzy, not because of his money, But because of the allegations, no one could believe he'd let surface fraud, coercion, contractual abuse, tampering with evidence, unlawful guardianship, and, beneath it all, the death of Eleanor Brooks. Sophia stood beside Nathan at the plaintiff's table, wearing black, not as a symbol of mourning, but of power. Her gaze didn't falter not when Victor entered the room, smirking, not when his lawyers tried to shake her during pre-trial arguments, not when her hands trembled under the desk. She had survived him. Now she would bury him. The judge entered. Proceedings began. First came the financials. Hackers from Nathan's covert team had traced embezzled charity funds, bribes to public officials, and silent acquisitions of media groups used to suppress scandals. Then came the contract. Nathan testified, reading from the original document, his voice unwavering. I was coerced into signing an agreement under the pretense of protecting the woman I loved. It contained a clause that violated every principle of human dignity, one that transferred legal guardianship of my wife to Mr. Shaw if I touched her. Murmurs filled the room. The judge silenced them with a stern gavel. Sophia stood next. I was never told about the contract, she said calmly. I believed my husband didn't desire me. For years, I lived in emotional isolation, unaware that I was being treated as a commodity. She turned toward Victor. I am not a signature. I am not a clause. I am not a consequence. Then came the footage, edited for court, distilled to the clearest violations. Scenes of Sophia's captivity, her sedation, her isolation. Doctor, Lily Hart's voice echoed through the screen. Your husband can't help you. You are owned now. Gasps, audible disgust. And finally, Clara Brooks. She took the stand like a storm in human form. I was told my sister died in a car crash. I believed it until I found receipts, signed waivers, emails, surveillance footage. She didn't crash. She was silenced. She paused, and I stayed quiet until now. Clara's hands trembled as she held up Eleanor's journal, found years later in a storage locker registered to a fake name. Inside, pages filled with fear, with love, with warnings. She was pregnant, and Victor was the father. She tried to escape, and he made sure she didn't. Then she turned toward Victor, her voice still. You tried to erase her, but now the world knows her name. Eleanor Brooks. Over and over, her name rang through the room. By mid-afternoon, Victor's composure began to crack. He whispered furiously to his lawyers, scoffed at witnesses, rolled his eyes at Sophia's account of their surveillance-ridden marriage. But it was Nathan's final statement that shattered the last mask. Nathan walked slowly to the center of the room, stood before the judge, and said, I gave up my right to touch the woman I love because I believed it would keep her alive. But love is not protection if it requires fear, and silence is not loyalty if it means losing yourself. He turned to Victor. You didn't just try to control me. You tried to rewrite the meaning of love. And now, you'll answer for it. The judge looked over her glasses. Defense, do you wish to respond? Victor stood, and then, without warning, he lunged. He pulled a letter opener from his suit jacket, small, silver, sharp. Sophia barely had time to react before Nathan stepped in front of her, shielding her. Court officers tackled Victor to the floor, pinning him down as he screamed, She was mine! You broke the deal! The court erupted into chaos. The judge pounded her gavel. Order! Victor's face twisted in rage as he was cuffed, dragged from the room like an animal unmasked. And Sophia, she didn't look away, because fear didn't own her anymore. Hours later, the final ruling came down. The judge declared the contract void, all assets frozen, Victor Shaw remanded into federal custody with no possibility of bail. A full investigation into his network launched immediately. And Nathan and Sophia free, finally, completely, irrevocably free. As they stepped out of the courthouse, the flash of cameras exploded around them. But they didn't pause. They didn't speak. They just held each other, truly, fully. For the first time in public, no masks, no distance, no contract, just breath, just love. And as the city roared around them, Sophia whispered into Nathan's ear, It's over. But Nathan smiled softly. No, he said, it's just beginning. The ocean stretched endlessly before them, a canvas of silver and blue melting into the horizon in Malibu. The air tasted different, clean, quiet, warm, in a way that had nothing to do with temperature. It was peace. Sophia stood barefoot on the balcony of their new home, sunlight painting her skin in gold. The beach whispered below, waves rising and falling like a breath that had waited 3 years to be exhaled. Inside, the house was full of windows, light, and finally, touch. Nathan stepped out behind her, arms circling her waist from behind. His lips found her shoulder, soft and reverent, and he buried his face into the curve of her neck, like a man learning how to exist again. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. So much had been said, so much had been endured, and now there was only the softness that comes after war. "I used to dream of this," Sophia murmured, "of waking up and not wondering what I couldn't say, what I couldn't feel." Nathan tightened his hold. "I used to dream of earning the right to touch you." She turned in his arms, facing him, eyes full of memory and wonder. "You never had to earn me," she said. "You only had to believe I was yours." He smiled, gentle, real, the kind that had once been hidden behind decades of armor. "Then let me believe it every day for the rest of my life." And he kissed her not like a man haunted, not like a man at war, but like a man who had survived everything and still chose love. That night, they made love without fear, not rushed, not desperate, but slow, sacred. Nathan touched her like she was a prayer he had waited 3 years to whisper. His hands trembled as they traced the parts of her he had memorized from a distance, but never dared to claim. Every sigh was permission, every look an invitation. He kissed the inside of her wrists, the hollow of her collarbone, the space between her ribs. And when their bodies finally joined, it wasn't just physical. It was a homecoming. Sophia cried, not from pain, not from fear, but from the simple, overwhelming truth that after everything, after silence, after captivity, after fire, they were still here, together, and Nathan too let his tears fall freely, for everything he hadn't been able to say, for everything he had risked, for everything he had almost lost. Afterward, they lay tangled in linen sheets, limbs entwined, the sound of the waves lulling them into something between sleep and serenity. "I wasted so much time," he whispered into her hair. "No," she replied. "You bought us time with your silence, with your restraint, with your love." He looked at her then, truly looked. "I want to give you back everything you lost." "You already have," she said. "You gave me my voice, my strength, my soul." They spent the next days rediscovering each other. In the kitchen, they danced barefoot to old jazz songs. In the garden, they planted lavender and rosemary, with soil still fresh between their fingers. They hiked coastal cliffs, their laughter echoing against the sky. And every night, they made love, like time was theirs again. It wasn't perfect. Sometimes, Sophia still woke in the dark, heart pounding, remembering the cold lights of that cell. Sometimes, Nathan stared too long at the ocean, guilt flickering in his eyes. But they never hid anymore. They spoke, they touched, they healed. And slowly, the past loosened its grip. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in fire, Sophia found Nathan in the living room with a large sketch pad on his lap. He was drawing her. But this time, she wasn't asleep or distant or caught in some hidden moment. She was laughing, hair windswept, eyes alive. "Is that how you see me now?" she asked, approaching him. He nodded. "It's how I've always seen you. I just never believed I deserved the real thing." She knelt before him, took the pencil from his hand, and kissed his palm. "You deserve everything," she said, "but I don't want perfect anymore. I want real, messy, us." He leaned down, resting his forehead to hers. "Then let's build it," he whispered, "not for show, not for safety, but for us." And in that moment, something shifted not just between them, but within them. They weren't surviving anymore. They were living, dreaming, loving, and when Sophia later whispered, 3 years in silence, "Now I can't spend 3 hours without you," Nathan only smiled and pulled her close. 50 years won't be enough," he said. "I want an eternity with you." And this time, nothing stood in their way, no contract, no fear, no silence, only love, loud, relentless, and finally, completely free. In the end, it wasn't money, it wasn't power. It was the touch, a gesture that seemed simple but had been denied for years in the name of contracts, threats, and fears. But when love is real, it finds a way, even in silence. They waited, suffered, survived. And the moment they finally allowed themselves, the world around them tried to destroy them. But it failed, because nothing is stronger than a love that chooses to resist, even when everything seems lost.